I'm here with a special guest. By the way, I was going to ask you this before we started recording, but now here we go. You pronounce your last name Hagopian?
Yeah, Armenia is a Christian country, so it's like biblical. It's really just Jacobson, but it's
Gotcha. Interesting.
Hagopian. Yeah.
Hagopian. So Ara Hagopian. Many of you know him from Twitter.
Oh,
Go on. Go on.
yeah, I guess so. Maybe.
Yeah, no, we have a bunch of like mutual followers and kind of in the same orbit. You label yourself a writer, a polemicist, and a podcaster. I've listened to your podcast, the Black Mold podcast, you were calling it.
Yeah. Well, the thing it kind of fizzled out. I had a friend who was supposed to do it with me, but he decided not to, and it's very hard to kind of fill time by yourself.
Yeah,
They just kind of fizzled out, unfortunately. So you really
yeah.
don't need to promote it or anything.
All right. Well, I will say that I think it's behind a paywall now, but I did enjoy the few episodes I've heard. I just kind of view you as a general creator. You write, you've done some podcasting. Obviously, you're doing a podcast now,
Yeah.
and you write good tweets. And yeah, I do think a lot of people
Oh.
probably know you from Twitter. But also, you are a MFA, graduate student in creative writing at the University of Florida in Gainesville.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
you're in your last semester now. Yeah.
Yep.
So tell me a little bit about kind of how you decided to pursue that and like what your general experience has been like getting an MFA in creative writing.
Um, I don't know. Can I just go right into my thesis? I have stuff to say about
Absolutely.
my
Yeah.
thesis.
No, yeah. You can say whatever you want. We're a fast and loose podcast here. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's yeah. So I defended my thesis a little while ago, and I was really disappointed with how it went. Um, my committee was, people I do respect. I mean, you can look them up. My committee chair was Camille, Camille Bordas. She writes for
Mhm.
the New Yorker. And Uam Akpan, who is African writer, who's been on Oprah and everything, and then Angie Mlinko, who's a poet,
Mhm.
somewhat
Yeah.
celebrated poet. So these are all people I kind of I respect. I've read their work. I think it's good, but yeah, I don't know. I wrote a kind of. I feel like I took some risks, and I was sort of summarily, kind of whipped back in line. You know what I mean? Um,
Mhm.
so, like, first of all, I think the internet, because I wrote about the internet.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's sort of like Notes from Underground, but
Mhm.
the internet.
That
But
sounds great. Honestly. Yeah.
but the guy
Yeah.
is the internet.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I think it's the internet's a really important part of the human experience now, and
100%, yeah.
I think it's worth thinking about and writing about. But there's this kind of pushback against that. There's this idea that it's like it's not real, that it's not legitimate, that it's just kind of you know uh yeah, just not legitimate.
Yeah, it's like a extension upon reality rather than reality itself.
Yeah, and I can't subscribe to that. I think it's I think it's important. But then Camille, my thesis chair said something like, "Oh, there's 3 billion people that don't have the internet," which I thought was just a weird standard to apply because those 3 billion people have nothing to do with what she writes about either. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, no, completely.
Um, and then and I tried to kind of be like, oh well, especially the younger generation, the people are around 20 years old or whatever, they put a lot of themselves into the internet.
Yeah.
They they that it's really not like the idea like you write a story where you go to a place and you do it, you take an action and it has consequences.
Yeah,
In
that's
many
kind
like
of go
That's
on,
not
yeah.
really how the world works anymore. You know what
It's
I
a
mean?
good
Like
point. Yeah.
a lot of people live on the internet.
Hmm.
Uh, and I
Yeah,
said,
no, yeah.
oh, this is especially true with 20-year-olds. And then said something like, the world isn't just 20-year-olds. which again I thought was really weird.
It is weird. Like, why do you have to be writing to encapsulate the whole world anyway? Like,
Yeah,
what's this standard that everything must be totally universal?
yeah. I mean, the
Or
world's not.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
like it's very strange. It's almost like I wonder if that criticism is like masking some other criticism or so. I mean, I don't want to get too polemical, although you do call yourself a polemicist, right, in your Twitter handle. But
why can't you get? Wait, why not?
wait, oh, I'm just being coy, I guess. But no, like I don't want to be too like on the nose political, because I try to promote a more general understanding of these kinds of things without like sounding like I'm on Fox News or something. But there is that. I do think there is that element to enforcing sort of. I don't even know if politically correct is the word, but some kind of, I suppose, liberal would definitely be the word, standard onto all writing, which is something that I bumped up against in undergrad and still now. I do think it's this fundamentally misguided notion that art should not be personal, that you're not taking a particular perspective, warts and all. I mean, that's definitely my understanding of of life, of any kind of writing, but especially creative writing, is leaning into your perspective, and like it's good to be open to other perspectives and other people that may exist in the world and sensitive to them. But the idea that you should write something that somehow is for everyone or encapsulates all of humanity is very foreign to me. I mean, I don't know if I'm saying, I don't know if that's totally what the person on your thesis board was saying, but it's kind of what it sounds like. I mean, do you think so?
Yeah, and I mean, I think that the idea of like polemics and stuff, it's a good thing to bring up because you know, it was a very polemical word, like and I tried to kind of establish it as like this character was speaking,
Mm-hmm.
and it was like kind of their manifesto, and
Yeah.
it's a character study, but it's also, I mean, the ideas are in there. It's polemical, you might say, and
Yeah, no, you mentioned you were going to incorporate elements of polemic into it, which I think is
yeah,
cool. Yeah.
and they're really not, because the prevailing attitude now is like it's like art should raise questions, it shouldn't give answers. You can't talk at your reader, you need to like and I've read that the CIA kind of created that.
Really?
um like they created the whole Iowa slash MFA like workshop culture, like postmodern.
Oh, you're gonna have to
It's
tell me more about this. That's fascinating.
well, because
Yeah.
what it does is it kind of it removes some political salience from literature and art. It's
Jeez. Yeah.
like Brecht, he wrote
Yeah.
like, and his stuff was very much like, oh well, this is why you should this is why you should be a communist. It was very it had a moral. There's a
Yeah.
moral of the story. And under that, under the new paradigm, like someone like Brecht would be substandard.
Yeah.
um
Yeah. I mean, the again, the kind of more Fox News polemical thing is like, oh, he'd be canceled. I don't think Brecht would be canceled. I think he'd be dismissed outright. Like, what are you doing? Like,
right,
he'd be dismissed on like a structural, like the very conceit of what he was doing would be dismissed as patriarchal, not patriarchal. What's the word I'm looking for? Pretentious. That's
yeah.
probably a Freudian slip there of some kind. But yeah, maybe patriarchal, pretentious, elitist, all these things. It would probably be, dismissed outright. And it kind of sounds like, no, I don't want to overstay. I don't know. I mean, I hope that the people on your thesis board aren't being that level of dismissive, but it sounds like they are kind of
Oh
dismissing
yeah,
it in such a way. Yeah.
yeah, they were pretty dismissive.
Damn.
Because I essentially I got called like a megalomaniac and an armchair philosopher, which like what else is a novelist besides a megalomaniac
And an
and
armchair
an armchair
philosopher.
philosopher?
I
You know what I mean?
agree entirely. I mean, thankfully I've never been in a room full of thesis advisors who've accused me of such, but I've I'm not going to say that I've been accused of being a megalomaniacal and an armchair philosopher so much as I am one. At least when I'm writing, at least when I'm podcasting.
Right.
Sometimes it's not like a bad thing to be. Obviously, megalomania can be bad for reasons that are obvious. but certainly philosophizing and being a big picture thinker and really addressing things that are in the big picture. I mean, I remember in my undergraduate creative writing classes, I specifically, at the time, I was like, okay, maybe this is true. Now I would probably push back on it more. I remember a line in some I don't remember what it's called. It was like a Norton published, like major creative writing, big, thick yellow textbook. Maybe even know the one. Because we're going to get into how we actually share the same undergrad experience later. But if you took, I assume you probably took creative writing at Cornell, and if you were in so you probably had that Norton book as well. And I remember that's the again, we'll have to talk more, or you'll have to tell me more after about the CIA element. But definitely that was like the textbook of think small, make a modest point. And I specifically remember, you'll be modest with your work, make small points. I remember the line, like, if you're into big picture thinking, you'd be better suited to a field like sociology or philosophy, which, maybe there's a point there to be taken. I have probably been a big picture thinker to a fault, and I was a philosophy major as well. So like, it's always been kind of doing both things at once, trying like both creative writing and philosophy. What was I going to say? I think it's a good thing for a writer to remember to kind of remain rooted, but at the same time, like if what inspires you as a person is philosophical, sociological matters, like of course you're going to write about them. And when you were tweeting about your thesis the other week, I think I responded as much. Like I have done a similar thing. I'm not in an MFA program, so I'm for better or worse outside the realm of criticism, so to speak. I don't have people who are criticizing my work on any kind of constant basis. But at the same time, I don't have people criticizing my work in terms of it being too philosophical. So I don't know how this lands on readers or not. People who've read my work can tell me. But I definitely mix in, I don't even like to call it philosophy, but, criticism, shall we say, with fiction, and subvert a little bit. Sometimes, like the novel I wrote, Dragon Day, kind of involves a parodic critical theory element that is also like sort of serious at the same time. And the work I'm writing next kind of involves things where it's like it's like auto fiction, which I think you described your thesis also as basically auto fiction, where it's like very close to who I actually am, but then there's also these like analytical polemics against the world, but it's all there's this it's a combination of fiction and polemic. It's what I do as well. It's what I think a lot of people do. A writer like Delicious Tacos, I think, even to a certain extent, as you said, we're all online. In the case of many people listening to this podcast, and we're all on Twitter, we're all engaging with polemics all the time. It's like a part of our daily reality. The reality of like going out and having a cause and effect type story happen to you. Yeah, it is a little dated, as you said. We are kind of glued to our screens all the time. So stories happen intertwining with polemics and the way we present ourselves online. I don't know. Does any of that resonate with your work?
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, like where you said, if you have a large scale point to make, you should be in sociology or philosophy, which is basically saying like, if you have anything important to say, you should put it in an academic journal where no one's going to read it.
That's exactly what it's saying. And the other caveat I add to that, so I'm not trying to, again, not trying to be too polemical on this point, but I was also a philosophy major, and analytical philosophy departments in the United States, they actually tell you the same thing there. Like, not to make a big point, make a modest point, make a modest like footnote on what someone else wrote. There's kind of a similar emphasis where people, and perhaps for good reason, obviously some people go off the rails and say wild stuff that's not grounded. So I don't think it's only, I don't think it's just all a CIA ploy. But there is a strong emphasis, I think, in academic culture in general, and included in MFA programs, to just really dissuade people from making bigger statements, which is interesting. Yeah.
Right. I mean, because if there's there's the body of literature where that's not allowed to make, that's supposed to raise questions rather than give answers, so to speak. And then there's academic journals that, have become just, basically unreadable, and
Yeah.
there needs to be something in the middle. You know what I mean? And like Common Sense by Thomas Paine. It was a pamphlet
Yeah,
basically, like
exactly.
yeah, like
Yeah.
a polemic pamphlet. Like we don't really have those anymore. There's it's become so verboten that like you basically thought like, oh, if you write something like that, you're gonna shoot up a school. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and that's I don't think that's good. Because like you know the
Hmm.
Karl Marx wrote a manifesto, and
Yeah.
that had an impact. Like that changed the world. Are we just resigned to the fact that that's never going to happen again in
Yeah.
human history?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, if it is going to happen, this is almost a cringy thing to say, but if it is going to happen, it's going to be on Substack, or maybe even somewhere more obscure than Substack. So I do think this space does exist, and it's online, and not that it's perfect there either. There's still different kinds of censorship. There's still, who gets boosted, who doesn't. But I think thankfully there is kind of an interesting middle ground between sort of academic culture and like normie culture, for lack of a better word. And I think it's kind of happening on Twitter and on Substack. I mean, am I too optimistic? I don't know, but I assume this is kind of what has brought you to Twitter. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, exactly. So like,
Yeah.
because I think what you're touching on is like there's this, you know, and Chomsky talks about this too, where the academia has become incredibly insular. It's not even really concerned with getting any kind of message out to the larger population. It's like with philosophy, it's like, oh, don't you know you can't ever restate something that may have been said before. That's a cardinal sin. So just try to like find some little kind of footnote and make
Yeah.
some little kind of incremental progress. Or no, like if you can restate an idea but put it in a way that is compelling to people now, uh you might not be might not be 100% original, quote unquote, but if you can get it out to the people, and ideas need to be pushed and pushed. You know what I mean? Like people
Yeah.
need to be reminded more than they need to be instructed. You know what I mean? Like, so when I was doing my thesis defense, uh I was talking to Angie Mlinko, and she said something like, oh well, if I wrote a treatise like this, I would be citing a bunch of people.
Yeah. I hate that. I hate
I'd
that.
be
Yeah.
citing Roca, I'd be citing whoever. And I thought, there's something very insidious going on there, because it's like, oh, if you don't from a certain background, if you don't have a certain kind of training, like you can't really have an opinion.
No, and it's such arcane training too when you get into like philosophy or like critical theory stuff, and you're
Yeah.
expected to be able to cite all these people. It's ridiculous. And I would also add to that the internet element is important. I mean, the world and the communication and language and everything. I don't know. Maybe every generation feels this way about itself, but I really think there's something about the internet which is a fundamental aeonic shift in human consciousness. That all these writers that she would have you cite were writing before the internet. So I do think there's this like,
Right.
not that it's not important to cite writers from the past, that's not what we're talking about, but I think in a very real sense, things have changed so much that like we do need to look at everything from a fresh perspective. If you want to bring in an older thinkers, great. I mean, I bring someone like Nietzsche into everything that I write and everything I do, but there's definitely still important ones, but things have changed so much that I think that it should be. The negative side of it is how chaotic everything is. The positive side is that it's I think a blank canvas to kind of re-engage
Right.
with some of these problems. If you'll tell me, I'm curious to hear a little more about your thesis and like what how long is it, what kind of narrative it is. You don't have to say much,
Well,
and I'm also curious if you're going to try and publish it elsewhere, but
well, can I keep working up to it a little bit?
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So yeah, and I agree. And like I love Rilke, and I love like all my favorite writer. Like Melville's my favorite writer, and
Yeah.
and Willie Dickinson's my favorite poet. And of course, they still have great things to offer us. Like I have a Rilke quote tattooed on my back. But
Nice. Yeah.
um, Yeah, I totally agree. And I think where you said something like, oh, well, maybe every generation feels this way about itself. And to a certain extent, that's true. But I think it is possible for a situation to be unique. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
definitely,
Um,
definitely.
and we are in a unique spot. Um, I think this is one of my tweets, I think, where it's something like, oh, I'm worried about the nuclear apocalypse. I'm really worried about that. I'm worried that if we don't do something, the world will end.
Yeah,
And that's the first part of the dialogue, and the second part of the dialogue is like, oh yeah, that's what they said about like not sacrificing a goat to Zeus.
yeah,
you
yeah,
know, and
yeah.
does that make sense? Or
No, tying into the every generation kind of has that sense about
right,
itself
but
of
I'm saying
calamity.
is
Yeah,
what I'm trying to say is like there's easier default to like, oh, every generation felt this way, but like no, we are in unique. We are fundamentally different from all the people that came before us. The internet is fundamentally altered the human experience.
I
You
think
know what I mean?
so. Yeah, definitely,
I
definitely.
don't think we're being. I don't think it's I don't think it's wrong to say that or like
No,
self-absorbed or myopic.
no, I don't. I don't think so either. I don't think so at all. I mean, increasingly, that's like a major topic that I'm trying to delve in on this podcast. Not so much politics, but kind of just delving into the reality of life on the internet, warts and all of its with all of its flaws. I mean, what is your take on the this is too big of a question, but what is your take on it? Are you kind of optimistic about the potentials or very pessimistic or somewhere in between?
Um, let me say one more thing first about
Yeah,
the.
totally. Yeah.
So, so after my thesis defense, my committee board actually kind of stayed after and we talked. And I'm sort of recalcitrant by nature, and I was felt like I was being condescended to.
I'm
Um,
sure. Yeah. Yeah.
and that really like that's my number one thing that I don't like. Like I was trying to talk about Hunter S. Thompson,
Hmm.
and I was like, oh, Hunter S. Thompson, he wrote in like a really strong first person, and he had the courage to like make these pronouncements about politics in the '60s.
Yeah.
And Jamilenko said something like, oh well, I mean Hunter S. Thompson had an editor. He had to like he had to filter himself through his. And I'm like, yeah, I know he had an editor. I'm not stupid.
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
an idiot. And then
Yeah.
like Uwem Akpan, is this Nigerian guy who's like, this really nice guy, but he started speaking to me in like proverbs. So he was like he talking about polemic stuff, and he was like, "Oh, how do you get a child to take a malaria pill? Like you put it in a piece of cake." And I'm like, "Oh, thank you for that. Like, thank you." Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but anyway, so then yeah,
I mean, I think there's
and I
something generational, there's just a lack
well,
of, yeah.
and then yeah, and then so I stayed after with Camille Bordas, and she said something like, "Oh, like what did you think? We were all going to say it was just perfect." And I was just really hurt that she would think that of me because I'm really not that person. Like
Yeah.
I'm sure it was deeply flawed. I don't think I wrote the best thing ever. I'm sure it was flawed. But like I tried to include some narrative elements to balance out the polemic stuff, and maybe I needed more of that, but they really did not meet me halfway at all. And
Yeah.
it really bummed me out.
No, I'm sorry to
Um
hear it. Yeah.
and I was just really hurt that she would say that, like think that of me. And then I
Yeah.
tried to like and she said like, oh, I don't like to be talked at when I read. I these ideas, they really didn't phase me. They didn't find them compelling or interesting. And I said something like, oh well, not everyone's as well read as you, not everyone's as smart as you. And I think she thought I was being sarcastic, but I was
Oh,
being sincere.
yeah.
Like not everyone's a university professor. These ideas, the standard for if an idea isn't important shouldn't be like if it phases a university professor, because again, you know, ideas should not only be for academia and academia alone. And I think we have a fundamental disagreement about, what book should be for and who they should be written for and like what they should be, because I don't think they should be just playgrounds for
For
the
the
Kanye Genti, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, no, that's a really good point. And it's always been my sort of criticism of MFA is that it almost feels like its own genre of writing. When you read the kind of bestseller published writers who you then see got an MFA, it's a very sort of, it feels very prepackaged, a very Like,
Yeah.
a lot of them, more recently, and this is not, you know, a lot of them more recently have, are basically like women of color, which is, great, but like it's like, it's very political. It's like, it's appealing to that NPR type listener class, as you said,
Right.
cognigenti. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think like because I did in my thesis, I wrote a little bit about Armenia because I've been to Armenia.
Right.
I'm an Armenian diasporan,
Hmm.
and you know, they were very overt about the fact that like I should have written that. I should have written that book instead. I
There you
shouldn't have written
go.
what I wrote.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, that's what they want you to write about. It's this,
yeah,
they want you to write, and it's good that you did write about that, because of course we should write about personal stuff, ethnicity, all of it. It's interesting
yeah,
stuff, but it's very oversold in the culture in general, and especially from that sort of cognigenti MFA world. It's all about, they want you to write about, your background in a demographic sense, and trauma that is ensued from that, and kind of poetically unpack that.
yeah.
I don't think I'm being unfair. Like, I think that's exactly what they
No, I
want
don't think so.
people
Yeah, I
to
tried to,
do. Yeah.
and I said to him, I was like, uh, I feel like that's been written before, and he said something like, again, the proverbs. He was like, "Oh, like I love you has been said a million times, but if you say it in the right way, like, I was like, yeah,
Yeah, no, but it's like, if
thanks for
it's not.
talking to me like I'm 5 years old."
Oh, that's
But no,
awful.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, but no, like I've been to like I think I'm just being honest about my experience. So like I've been to Armenia, and there's this whole, I don't know if you know about Artsakh, but it's like basically
Not
it's
really.
like
Tell me that. Yeah.
basically like a Israel Palestine type situation, but it's like
Oh,
Armenia and
with,
Azerbaijan.
yeah. So, okay, I do know about that. I
Yeah,
didn't know. Yeah. Yeah.
and I I've been like 10 miles from the front, and I still like and now I'm back here, and I can't bring myself to care about it. Like I
Yeah.
just can't care
Yeah.
about it. I care more about the internet.
Yeah.
And let's think, like I'm thinking about, like I want to think about that. Like I want to kind of be honest about that. I don't want to kind of like pretend I felt a certain way about going to Armenia because I didn't. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I hear you. Yeah. That's interesting. I mean, yeah, I do think creative writing, I think authentic writing, it should be about the immediate, you shouldn't have to reach for something that feels somehow noble. You write about your life, and that's what good writing is. But I don't think that's what they tell you. That's not what they tell you at MFA programs, evidently.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
everyone, I think if we're being honest, I think most people, or a lot of people, significant amount of people, care more about the internet than like anything else.
Yeah.
And and I want to kind of be honest about that. And I think we know that on some level, like some conscious level, but we don't want to admit it, which is why we try so hard to say to consume the stuff that like really pulls out all the stops to try to root us in like the real world. Like the real world matters. Like I have like this is how I feel about this country, and this is my experience. Like the real world still matters, and I'm not saying it doesn't, but I feel like everyone kind of is disillusioned, and which is why we try so hard to pretend that we aren't. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you just couldn't write. Like you couldn't like the world now doesn't lend itself to good storytelling. Like you couldn't write Moby Dick because they would find him in one day with
No, it's
sonar.
it's a huge problem for writing. And people talk about that in screenwriting too, because there's a genre that's really supposed to still be rooted in cause and effect. And it's like, well, you'll just text the person. That how many great movies can you look at that wouldn't work because of not even the internet, but cell phones? It's tons of movies.
Exactly. Or like Star Wars or
Yeah.
Dune, they fight with swords.
Yeah,
which like because that's cinematic. That's that's
Yeah.
interesting. And of course, it's not how war works now. You just press a button and you blow something up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, totally. So I don't know if this encapsulates your thesis, but I really do think there is something to that, like that the nature of the story is changing. Not, if someone wants to still write a great adventure story that takes place back in time, more power to them. But I think there is kind of like new writing. Like I don't know if you read like Zero HP Lovecraft or anything, but like it's just like
I mean, I've seen his tweets, and I think
he's a Twitter guy. Yeah.
yeah. Go
But
ahead. Sorry.
just that he's an example, and he writes an established tradition himself. It's kind of Lovecraftian, Borgesian, shall we say? But yeah, Borges is actually an interesting talking point. Like, I mean, things almost have to have that kind of postmodern element where you're kind of possibly dealing with polemics or like just not modular stories so much. I don't know if my lingo's right here. You get what I mean? Like, I think you're very right that the internet necessitates a different kind of storytelling, because it's no longer about X went to Y and this happened, and now it's more about just this ocean of information that we're in and how we navigate it. I think that's the story now more so, and there's different things you can do if you're writing creatively to bring that out. Like, again, I'm not trying to pimp my own work here. It's just more I'm just honestly thinking about the ways I've dealt with this. Like the first story in the next self-published book that I'm going to put out is just a series of emails, and like that's the story.
Right.
And like stuff happens, but it's that you get it through the lens of emails and people's changing emotional states. And I feel like that's more the world we live in now.
Right. And I mean, like I always say, like do you remember Harry Potter, like the Goblet of Fire, where he's trying to figure out how to breathe underwater, and he can't figure it out. Like he can't, like he's researching and he can't figure it out.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing like that would never come up. Like I am omniscient. I know I there's nothing I can't know. I have it all in my pocket. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
And I think, like we used to kind of give, like in folklore, the heroes used to be more powerful than that. Like we used to give our heroes great power. Like, Hercules is super strong. And he's more powerful than everyone else. He's like someone to look up to. Where now, I'm more powerful than, I'm more powerful than the people in Lord of the Rings. Like they have swords. I have a gun. Like I could just shoot them, like
Yeah.
I'm more powerful than like all the folk heroes. We used to give like folk heroes great power. Now we have to like take powers away. You know what I mean?
No, absolutely. Yeah, it's fascinating. It's a real issue, and like it sounds like it should be a positive thing, but in your mind, I mean, I guess from a creative writing standpoint, it creates problems, as we said. But like, I guess I did want to circle back to that. Like, do you think it's good? Do you think the internet is good or bad? That's too broad of a question. But like, what is your? Are you more of a tech optimist or pessimist? Or how do you present that in the thesis? Would be the other version of that question.
I haven't thought about it from that particular angle. I mean, I don't know. I'm a pessimist in terms of I'm not quite sure how much longer humanity is going to last.
Yeah.
And I'm really not trying to be like edgy when I say that, but like
no, yeah.
Like the Black Plague, like whenever that comes again, I don't think we're making it past that, whether it's like, 500 years, 1,000 years, that level of I don't think we're making it past that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Interesting.
Like if COVID was the Black Plague, I think we'd be extinct.
Yeah.
But
the in terms of the internet, it kind of just you're kind of more like it just is. You know what I mean? Like it's just the air we breathe. Yeah, that's also
I don't
fair.
know.
Yeah.
Like I'm I guess particularly like porn, I think is bad.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I really don't know. I can't really answer your question.
No worries. It's all right. Because it's I guess I would wax pessimistic about it, but I don't know. I don't have like a super thought out answer for it either, honestly. And I think you bring up porn. I mean, I think there's a lot of bad things on the internet that kind of suck your energy up and then do nothing good with it. I think that element of the internet is very bad. The element where it takes your energy and it takes something good, which is your energy and perhaps your sexual energy, and puts it toward nothing. It depletes you. But obviously, we're talking on the internet now. Like I do think there is opportunity for connectivity. So there are good things and bad things happening at the same time with it. I think overall, I'll say this. I think overall, we as a society, that's I guess that would be this is a megalomaniacal armchair philosopher point to make, but we as a society, I think, are really struggling to adjust to the internet.
I'm sorry, I can't engage with you anymore. You're a megalomaniac. I'm gonna hang up the phone. No, I'm kidding.
No, we're getting to that section of the conversation, but yeah, no,
Yeah,
like we're starting to adjust to it, and there's a lot to write about there and explore.
right. I mean, yeah, and I think the proof is in the pudding of that it's having all these negative impacts. But I just think like there's this idea that like, oh, if you're just more disciplined, if you just kind of make an effort to turn your phone off, like that you can kind of you can escape it in some way. But I just really think like our brains weren't built to like withstand the internet. You know what I mean?
They
Like
weren't, yeah,
we're fighting a losing battle.
very
You know what
much,
I
yeah,
mean?
yeah. No, and the whole like, oh, log off, turn off your phone.
Yeah,
Okay, first of all, I do think that's still good advice, and I would encourage anyone listening who's like feeling overwhelmed to do exactly that, touch grass. But it was way easier to say that like 10 years ago. Like you actually
right.
used to say, if you're getting off a chat on Facebook or whatever, like BRB, like you'd actually tell people when you were logging off. We don't do that anymore because we're always assumed to be online. And that happened within the past 10 years, I think. And it's I mean,
Right. I mean,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, I have this thing in my pocket that can really it offers me all the like libidinal stimulation and all the intellectual stimulation and all the kind of sort of connections and entertainment that I could ever need. Really, the only thing it doesn't do is like, pay my rent
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
and my grocery bill. And that's horrifying.
Yeah,
It's
it is. Yeah.
and I don't think, like you really I can't really have a job without the internet. Like, I can't, it's not an
Yeah.
option to really not be plugged in.
Yeah, you can't
Um,
really have a job, and you definitely can't self-promote. Like, what I mean?
right.
The other option to having a job is like, oh, become a self-starter. Well, then you need the internet even more and to use it even more intensely. So it's,
Yeah. And I
yeah,
know this has been said about porn before, but like, I think it's, again, people need to be reminded more than need to be instructed. But, like, if you were in the wild, as some sort of ape man and you see like like a fertile potential like breeding partner, like that's like why you're alive. Like that is like you might get one shot at that. So your brain is like, okay, like this is it. Like this is like we're gonna flood you with like all the chemicals we have. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like you need to take action. Like this is it. Like you need to take action right now.
yeah, exactly.
Um,
And now it spreads so
and
thin.
now I can
Yeah,
see that whenever I want. Like I can see it a
yeah,
million times a day. you
yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah,
and our brain doesn't know the difference, and we get flooded with so many chemicals that like we just become numb, and we can't enjoy. Like I can't enjoy. We can't enjoy anything else.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Um,
no, I think it happens with porn. I think it happens to some people with like video games and even just entertainment. Not that specific thing of your, your survival reproductive instincts kicking in necessarily, but just generally like there's a story. If I was smarter and could cite names, I'd remember who wrote this, but some story that I read at some point in college, a real story, not a fiction story, like about someone. Maybe it's in a Dickens novel. I don't remember, but like there's a story about someone like a piece of newspaper, in the 1800s or something, blew in front of them. They immediately picked it up and started reading because they could only read so much, like words. You know what I mean? Like they had a very limited amount of stuff that they could read. So if they see writing on the ground, it's like I have to read this because it's
right.
information and it's interesting. And now it's like we have to really tune out all this text, and not just text, of course, but images and video and sound. And it's this insane task of like cultivating the media we take in, the media and
Yeah.
information. And I think it's a game of like, knowing the stuff to look into, and then also just like being able to totally tune other stuff out. If you don't have that, like you'll go insane.
Yeah.
Especially
And
as like a smarter person. Like if you actually like are intellectually engaged, it blows your brain up. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a profound prison to be in. Like surfeit of information is so much more arresting than like lack of information. It's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
we're all paralyzed. There's you know Earth is it's like trying to drink from a tsunami. We can't.
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't know.
And like we're almost the same age, so like I don't know about you, but like I definitely like we're not. I don't know if you identify as Gen Z or millennial. I definitely identify as like later millennial, and I do remember
Yeah,
a different
96.
world. Yeah, I'm late 94, almost 95, so very close to
Okay.
it. Like I do remember like listening to the radio and listening to new songs on the radio. Like I remember a world before the internet, in
Right.
short. So like,
Or like not having a phone, like having an
oh,
iPod.
definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
I had a flip phone until college. Like,
Yeah.
so we remember a different world. But
Right. But
yeah, this one.
that's that's gone. That's like we're the last ones to, like my students, they're 18, 19, 20. They don't remember a different world.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Exactly. So you teach you I guess that would be standard MFA program you teach as well.
Yeah, to teach like fiction writing 101.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, like we have this anchor where like our grandparents and they kind of represent like this kind of anchor we have, this tie to like this like older world where things that kind of made sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm worried about what's going to happen. We don't have that anymore. Like what happens like when like the 20-year-olds now when they're 80 and they're kind of like what's going to happen? Like what's
no, I mean, hopefully they'll be fine. I do think that eventually will adjust in some way, but I hope that adjustment isn't the living in a pod, drinking Soylent, and having no sexuality other than porn adjustment. I hope we can keep you know what I mean? Like I do think, I mean, as you said, like who knows how much longer this thing is going to go on, humanity, that is. Like obviously there's a lot of because of that. I tend to think, at least in the shorter term, like, yeah, it can definitely continue indefinitely, but like, are we entering into a new sort of dark age?
You're right.
That's the big risk. I mean, apocalypse is a big risk, but also like a new dark age. Is it a world worth living in? And I think that people have been engaged, every generation is engaged with that question, how to make the world continue to be a place worth living for your offspring. But I think for us it's not like fighting Hitler, it's like dealing with the fucking internet. Yeah.
Right. I'm not sure. I feel like we said it. I feel like we've touched on most of it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do we want to move on to like?
We can move on to Cornell in a second.
Okay.
But I mean, I will give you one more shot
right.
here. Like anything else you want to say about your thesis or the program? You're graduating pretty soon, so the review notwithstanding, like all's gonna be well, hopefully, right? And you'll.
I mean, I hope. I mean, inshallah. I'm just trying to get a job.
Yeah. Right.
But yeah, I'm definitely done with academia.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
No. I'm going to talk very personally about Cornell and all that. And after Cornell, I had thought about going to academia, and I still wonder if I should have, because like my dad's a philosophy professor. Like it's kind of like an apple doesn't fall too far from the tree thing. It's like very much my personality. But hey, I think even though I'm not earning a salary doing it, I like doing podcasts more than academia because we can be free.
Exactly.
We'll talk more about that in a sec. But do you and no pressure on these questions, and if I ask something where it's like I don't really have a good answer, I can just cut it out, but do you think you'll try and publish your thesis through any means? Like maybe the Simon and Schusters of the world are a little, I never tried to publish with them, but like a lot of people in our sphere obviously self-publish or publish like Terror House or like one of these smaller presses. So I'm just curious if you have any designs on that, or if you're just done with creative writing for now, which is also fair.
My confidence is kind of shot a little bit, but yeah, I might just be like, I might just self-publish and tell my followers like, hey,
I think you should. You got a good following.
Here's my shitty, here's my shitty thing. You can like read it for like $1. Like, I don't know, something like that.
No, I think you should. And like, I'm probably going to self-publish my next thing if you ever, Amazon's fine. There's different means to do it. But yeah, look, we can talk about Cornell in a second. But yeah, no, I do think your followers would, I would like to read it for sure. And, I think it'd be worth getting out there. Like, obviously the whole space we cultivate here is a lot of people who are quote unquote self-published or like with smaller publishing houses. So there's a lot of opportunity for that. And I think people would really appreciate it. And even if it isn't perfect, you know what I mean? Like you just get the work out there, and it does feel good. And if your confidence is shot now, like you get a better, even just like a modestly good response from other people, you'll see there's another audience for it. And I think all will be well. But yeah, let's want to move on to Cornell, shall we?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's back up a step. Yeah, I was kind of going to gloss on this during like my opening monologue, which is not a monologue, but long story short, Ara and I went to Cornell together. We attended undergraduate at the same time. I was class of 2017. You were class of 2018. So we overlapped pretty significantly. I remember seeing you on campus. I don't think you remember seeing me, but no hard feelings. There was a lot of people on that campus. Of notice, not only did we go to Cornell at the same time, but we were both in, and Ara's talked about this on his podcast, we were both in cooperative houses. We both lived in co-ops. I was in one. I don't know if it's like doxy to like be saying the names of these places, but I'm just going to do it and we can trim it out later if either one of us is less than comfortable with it. I was in a house called Von Krom, which has since been renamed, fun fact, because the person who was named after was like part of the Nazi party or something. So now it's called Redbud. But you were, yeah.
Just, if people aren't understanding what that is, it's like a frat, but it's co-ed. It's a lot more like, hippy dippy. Like we all cook and clean for each other, and it's exactly. All about like cooperative living, social justice, all that kind of.
Yeah, very much. Yeah. Thank you for unpacking that. I guess some people, I think different universities do have co-ops, but a lot of them don't. It's kind of like a parallel to Greek life, co-ed. Not officially social justice oriented in its mission, although Water Margin might have been.
Water Margin was, yeah.
Water Margin was, Von Krom less so.
But we had, instead of Rush, we had Mosey, quote unquote. And we had like, instead of a Rush event, which, I haven't been to one of those, but I assume they're just like parties. We had we had show and tell or something, I
went through the exact same process, and you Mosey. There's like 6 or so different co-ops on Cornell's campus. Water Margin and Von Krom were both some of the bigger. I think Von Krom might have actually been the biggest. But 660 was the biggest, which we'll also probably mention 660 later in this conversation. But yeah, basically, suffice it to say, it's a co-ed, sort of hippy dippy. Not that everyone was a hippie either, by the way. There's a lot of exchange students who did this, and kind of more punky type people. But with definitely that left to center, shall we say, element. So that's another thing we had in common. My story about finding you, Ara, is that so I think we've been mutual followers, like not talking, but just like casual mutual followers since like 2020. I think I wrote like a piece called like a piece called "The Politics of Aesthetics Revisited" that maybe you read, maybe you didn't, I don't know, but like you followed me around that time, and I was just like, cool, and I followed you. I thought it was interesting that you were a MFA student, but then fast forward to November of last year, and I'm on Facebook, which I never go on Facebook. I don't use Facebook, and I saw your name come up, and you go under your name on Twitter as well. And I saw your name come up as a someone with whom I had like 20 or 25 mutual friends. And I assumed I was going to click that like mutual friends link, and it was going to be just like the normal set of like, because I do have like sort of online political sphere friends on Facebook too. So I assumed it was going to be a slew of them, but actually it was 25 people from college. And then I went to your page and didn't necessarily recognize you at first, because you do look different than when I would have seen you on campus. You've grown your hair out since then. Right. But I scrolled through a little bit. I was like, oh my God, it was that guy. And it was this crazy thing. It was definitely the first time my Twitter sort of life has intersected, not with my real life, but just like with that realm of connections ever. And I thought it was very cool. And I reached out to you at that point. This was back in November, and we first started talking. It was also around the time I started listening to your podcast, and you talk about Water Margin and some of your very formative, I guess, experiences there, which I won't make you rehash if you don't want, but I was very moved by it. I'll just say that. I mean, it was, the story involving sexuality and girls, and specifically for me, I remember you left Water Margin, you left your house, and you went and slept on the bench of Sage Chapel. Which is the church, basically like the cross-denominational chapel / church worship space on Cornell's campus. And I was like a practicing Catholic in college, not so much anymore, but so I just thought in my head, like, I know the wood of those benches. Like, we have, not that I ever slept on them, but like, I felt very connected to what you were saying. And I've had, again, I don't know if you want to rehash, you don't have to, but that sense of like, having a crush on someone and being awkward. In my case, like I was actually in a relationship. I don't want to necessarily get into all the details, but just I know that sense of being in one of the, these houses were very like sex positive and like just fine, but then like as a slightly more quieter, awkward person, like you get sort of alienated from that, and it's uncomfortable. I could relate to it very much. Let's just leave it at that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I won't rehash that particular story, but because it's too complicated. But yeah, just in general, like I've struggled my whole life with like really profound like anxiety and particularly just like social anxiety and like people will like say hello to me and I would just not say anything back and I would keep walking, like I was really that, I was like, oh, that kid's gonna like shoot up the school. Like that was me.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then I went to Cornell and I was still, obviously I've been lucky enough to make some progress. Like I'm not quite that person anymore, but when I went to Cornell, I was still that person. And somehow I got to water margin because it's not like it's like a lottery system, it's so I guess somehow I got in. And,
Yeah.
These are people who, it's at Cornell, and it's like people from Westchester, like people who, are really, have a lot of money. Like I'm not from that background at all.
Right, yeah.
People have a lot of money, like people like really really cool, like people who have been in possession of themselves, their whole lives. Like
yeah, that was
like,
my feeling about it too. And I'm also not quite from that background. Yeah.
Like but people who were like,
yeah, go on.
Not just like 1 or 2 steps ahead of me, but like 10 steps ahead of me.
Like on a social basis. I mean, they're very, very outgoing types of people a lot of the time.
Yeah. And it was interesting because here's that sort of sphere, and then all of a sudden like thrown into that is like Bartleby, the scrivener, which is me. And,
yeah.
Like I really kind of threw them all for like they really didn't know what to do with me. It was just kind of fun. Looking back, it's funny, but at the time,
it's kind of painful, probably. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, and I apologize for how naive this sounds, but like it was my kind of first introduction to the idea that like if just because you're a liberal doesn't mean you're a good person.
Yeah. I mean? No. That's a totally valid. I mean, for me too, like I would say college was sort of a process of that. Again, not to pit my own work, but my book Dragon Day, which Dragon Day is a thing from Cornell, is kind of an I don't mention that in the book, but like anyone with familiarity with Cornell would know that it was very much like tried to encapsulate my experience of that. I mean, not that specific thing of realizing that not just because you're liberal doesn't necessarily mean you're a good person, but like sort of to that tune. I mean, you're told, I think you actually talking about this in your podcast as well. Like you're told college is supposed to be the best years of your life. For me, like it really was good in a lot of ways, but like, I don't know, there was the kind of that edge of sadness or like awkwardness to it as well. Where it's like, maybe this isn't totally for me or something. And I just always felt like the odd man out. So many memories of being like feeling like the only person at the college party, like who wasn't having a good time, like that whole aesthetic. Yeah.
And again, like like just the things that would happen that piss me off. Like again, I'm sort of very recalcitrant by nature.
Mm-hmm.
And of course I had a tremendous amount of anger because here are these people that could function so much better than I could, and they were doing things that I didn't, they were kind of doing certain things that were kind of shitty, but like I felt like I couldn't say, like they were just so much better than me. It's like it would be like saying something to like Judge Holden or something.
From Blood
so
Meridian.
Yeah, but then so like that, like so that band, we're gonna get into that band that we both knew, but like I knew those guys, and like we had a game room at Water Margin, and somewhere down the line that that game room that anyone could go into sort of became their like band practice room, which no one else could go into. And like that would have been fine. Like, like, I like, that's great that you have a band like that. Like, I would have approved that if it was put to a vote at the House meeting, but it would never was put to a vote at the House meeting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um,
Interesting. Yeah.
and they were and they would kind of do things where, like, it would be like, oh, they were all hanging out, so they were gonna like their particular time hanging out became like house pizza night, and they would use the money of the house budget to order pizza, like, basically for themselves, or they
Yeah.
would
Like
buy
they
themselves.
were the cool kids.
Yeah, or they would
Yeah.
buy themselves like expensive for, like, they, particularly one summer when I was living there, like, that one girl, like, I don't know if you remember, but like
Oh yeah.
she kind of ordered, like, her and her girlfriend, like, she ordered like all this fancy food for, like, her and her girlfriend, basically,
Yeah.
with the house money, you know.
Jeez.
And
Yeah.
and then I remember something happened where, like, we had a party and someone, some drunk person, like, they broke into the band practice room, and they sprayed the fire extinguisher on their, equipment, and they kind of messed up their equipment, which is obviously, like, I'd be pretty mad about that if I were
Yeah.
them. But then that one guy, I don't know if you remember, but
Yeah. Yeah. I do.
he uh he put something on Facebook, like, oh, basically like, was overtly, like, threatening this person, and and everyone kind of just was like, oh, ha ha ha, like, because, like, everyone loved him, he was so
Yeah.
cool. And I had to be the one at the house meeting to be like, maybe we shouldn't, like, be threatening people, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and of course, and that's coming from, like, Bartleby the scrivener that everyone hates,
Yeah.
but I had to, I had to do it, I had to. um Anyway, you
Yeah.
can
No,
still I'm still
that's
worked up about it.
no. Yeah. Gosh. I mean, okay. So in defense, I guess, of Von Krom, then I actually do think we might have been more authentically democratic than you guys, because I everything down to my most minute points was put to a vote there. And there was, I think, a little bit less of a hierarchy there in terms of who was cool and who was not. So I'll say that
Yeah.
in defense of the co-op I was in. It was a little bigger. It was a little, like, Water Margin, like, was one of the cooler co-ops, no doubt. Them and Cayuga Lodge were like the really cool ones. Like, think of it like a top tier
Right.
rat, basically. Which is kind of funny if you're kind of more socially awkward. But yeah, there is like a more lottery-based system, so it'd probably help you get in. Not that, like, you get what I'm saying. I'm not saying you're not,
I
like,
get what
cool,
you're saying.
but you get what I like. Those are intensely, like, fucking hierarchical places. I remember. I mean, I still remember, like, I mean, we could really reminisce for a long time. I don't know how interesting it would be to listeners. I remember, like, Mosey and Cayuga Lodge, and then like they seemed to really like me at first, but, like, it was just a weird. And I there were some cool people there, but, like, it's just a weird vibe. And definitely, yeah, Water Margin 2 was one of the ones with, like, a really cool set of people. And what you're saying now confirms that perception. But yeah, no, I don't know if I will say the name of the band, because I don't mind if people look this stuff up and, like, dox me. Not dox me, like, get me harassed, but, like, people can, like, find this stuff about me if they want. But I don't necessarily want to make it super easy. Like, you can look, people can look this stuff up, and I also, I guess, just for the sake of the other people involved too. But yeah, so I won't say the name of the band, but yeah, you mentioned this band, your personal experience with them. I actually have a funny memory related to them as well, which is that I used to write for Cornell's newspaper. I would cover culture. I would write music reviews, and I did so. The band was playing at this co-op that was actually right next to Von Krom, right next to the co-op I lived in, called 660, which was an even bigger, kind of more free-flowing, more hippie one. And they played a show in the basement there. And I went in. I didn't even see the whole show. I was late. And I still stand by this, whether or not some of the people in the band were douchebags. It was definitely, like, a really positive vibe. Like, it felt like being at,
Yeah.
like, a Velvet. I mean, yeah, you liked them too, basically,
Yeah.
right? Music,
and they were good.
Yeah.
They were
They were very
talented.
good. They were surprisingly
Yeah.
good for just, like, a band of, like, well, I shouldn't say surprisingly good. A lot of good bands come out of colleges, but, like, Vampire Weekend, for example. But, like, so not shocking, but, like, yes, they were very good. And it was like, I thought, like, Velvet Underground a little bit. Like, I made some pretty highfalutin comparisons in this article, and I was like, but before getting into the more negative element of it, like, it really was a good show. I remember everyone was dancing, very positive vibe. I wrote a glowing review. This was when the band was new too, so I think it meant a lot to them initially, that I wrote it, gave them good coverage. But then two things happened. One of them you remembered. The other one, probably no one remembers but me. I'll start with the one that you remember. Basically, the my article revealed to the fire marshal that 660
Right.
was having these shows, which is like very strictly against fire code. So they got in big trouble. I don't think anyone was like cursing my name or anything because I think they all understood that I would have had no way of knowing that. But that was one thing that happened because of that article. And then the other thing I remember, which ties a little bit into the political, more polemical stuff. I remember this was 2016, like a couple of months before Trump's election, so it was like peak, tense times in terms of like wokeness and all that. And I remember it was almost weird because like the lead singer of that band was like he wasn't even like white, but like still everyone was like, well, they were taking me to task for being so gushing, which I probably deserved. I'm still kind of embarrassed about that. But then they were also like,
oh, for God's sake, like what? No, you didn't deserve it. But anyway, go ahead.
well, thank you, I appreciate that. But they were also like, this white guy is writing about like this white band and citing like all these white reference points like Iggy Pop and Velvet Underground. Like we need to move past this. Which is not that remarkable of a thing for that to happen at that time, but I definitely remember this is the only time I ever at that age, it was the only time I ever gotten like dragged for writing something. Yeah.
And I guess maybe we shouldn't say the names, but yeah, that guy, the guy who's the lead singer, he was Mexican, I'm pretty sure.
He was, yeah. I think the person who the idiot who was writing the comment just saw the picture and like was like, oh, he looks white, It's one of those things.
Yeah.
But
it's Italian or something.
Yeah, I don't share that because it's like I'm not like still traumatized by that. It's like funny, but but it really I just stare at mostly because it kind of encapsulates that time a little bit. I think like that you really could write something as innocent as like an excited review about like a punkish band and like it would be interpreted politically, which was very much of that time. What more to say about Cornell? I mean, you graduated 1 year after me. Thankfully, both of us missing any years because of COVID. So you took like 1 year off and then went to Florida, basically? Not 1 year off, you know what I mean? But like I don't know what you're doing this 2 years. You can talk about it.
Yeah, 2 years. 2 years in between. I really didn't. Well, 1 year I was just kind of working shitty jobs, and then the next year I kind of traveled. Like I went to Armenia. And my dad was in the Peace Corps in Morocco, so I stayed with him for a little bit.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, that's a good.
Kind of bummed around.
Yeah, that's neat. I didn't study abroad. I didn't do that, and sometimes I wish I had. I moved to Los Angeles like almost right after college to work in the entertainment industry.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been there ever since, so I'm kind of settled here. But I do sometimes wonder if like I should have, not that I should have. Like we are all on our own path, but I do think it's a cool thing that people do, like travel around more. I didn't do.
Yeah, I mean the grass is always great. Like because I would like to not be living paycheck to paycheck, so I'm a little jealous of you. You know what I mean?
Not that I'm exactly swimming in it either, but yeah.
So hopefully, get a cool. I'm gonna be 27 in the summer, so hopefully I can finally get like a career going or something. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I'm sure. I mean, you're obviously not to put myself in some weird paternal position because I'm barely old. But you're obviously you're obviously very smart. You went to these institutions, like had whatever mixed experiences you had at them, like you have a lot to offer. So I think you'll find your way.
Thank you.
I don't know you that well, but I'm confident in that. It's hard for all of us right now, like just figuring out like what to do for work. I think it's kind of a weird time, but I think you'll find something, and I think you'll also keep putting good material out there online, hopefully.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I mean, be paternal as you like. I need a
pat on the back.
I need a daddy figure. Yeah, I mean, my dad's name's Matt, actually. So.
Damn.
But hey, if anyone is listening to this, you should hire me.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. What kinds of things are you looking for? Just out of curiosity.
I don't know. I mean, I'd like to. Like I wrote for the Cornell Daily Sun too, and I wrote I just had like an op-ed, and I obviously that's a pretty competitive, like everyone should just get paid to like write their opinions, and and
Yeah.
maybe I am a megalomaniac if I think I deserve to, I deserve that. But
Yeah, well, I would
I
definitely
don't know.
like whether you're writing fiction or nonfiction, like wherever you go and whatever you end up doing for money, like just keep writing. It would be
Yeah,
my advice to anyone. I don't know, because like I don't write for a living. Like I write every day in the morning, fiction,
right.
nonfiction, whatever, and I podcast, and that stuff kind of keeps me feeling like I'm still shining my light in the world a little bit, even as jobs
Exactly.
can sometimes be suffocating. But like, yeah, just keep at it. I think is the main thing, which
Yeah.
everyone says, but I
Right.
think that's true.
Yeah, and
Kind
you're
of,
not just talking to me. Yeah, all the
yeah,
listeners.
yeah. Well, it almost feels like we're wrapping up, but I wouldn't mind keeping going if you still have time. There's a couple other touch
I
points.
mean,
Yeah,
do we want to do like a part two, or I don't know, I can come back some other time, or
we can do a part two if you want. I mean, I just wanted to. What do you have to go?
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I do have some other stuff to do,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
um,
Let's wrap it up. I was just going to kind of comment that I do think 2017 to or sorry, 2013 to 2017 or 2014 to 2018 in your case was like definitely a very interesting time to go to college, like during the
yeah,
rise of Trump. Just kind of wanted to briefly touch on that. And then if you don't mind, I'll ask one more question if you don't
oh
mind.
yeah, all right,
And it's this is a little more personal too in
sure,
its way. But kind of what your socio-political trajectory, so to speak. So obviously, I don't think you necessarily identify strictly of the left or of the right, maybe more so of the left even. I don't even need you to put yourself on a label like that, but so when I first found your Facebook, you were basically a big Bernie Sanders supporter. I think your
yeah,
banner on there is still you meeting Bernie. But then it's interesting because you haven't really posted on Facebook since 2020. A lot of us have kind of moved away from Facebook, but the last things you were posting were like Benjamin Braddock screenshots and Michael Tracy screenshots. So how would you kind of describe like your development of thought there? Like you just found you mentioned earlier, which I thought was interesting, that you kind of realized that liberals weren't necessarily good people. And
yeah,
it seems like, you're willing to sort of rub shoulders with the dissident right or the populist right without being like a rightist. I think there's kind of a more general dissident space that it seems like you're a part of. Just wanted to get your thoughts on that before we wrap.
yeah. Well, I mean, I thought I deleted my Facebook. I didn't know it was still like
Sorry.
accessible,
Yeah.
but uh, yeah. I mean, I definitely, I don't know. I guess I think that, like, the popular thing to say is that you're, you know, uh, socially liberal and fiscally conservative,
Yeah.
and really that makes no sense. Really, I think I'm like,
Mhm.
fiscally. I think I'm fiscally liberal and socially conservative. If
Yeah,
that
yeah,
makes,
yeah, yeah.
you
And
know,
fiscally liberal and fiscally left sense. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
yeah, yeah,
Like I really don't think there are any legitimate arguments to be made against, like, uh, wealth redistribution and free healthcare and free
yeah.
housing. But I support all that. But I do think there are some arguments to be made for things like
Institutions like
yeah,
marriage
collective,
and this kind of thing.
yeah,
Family. Yeah,
yeah, right, like like two parent families, like collective spirituality, modesty, chastity, even, just robust sort of social norm, like things like that. I think that's a much easier argument to make than arguing that poor people should starve.
yeah, definitely, definitely. And no, it's I think you have a good head for just from what I've seen, heard on your podcast and seen on your Twitter for the kind of just the way that things like, and it's almost a tired talking point, but I'll say it anyway. Like things like wokeness are used to sort of mask economic inequality or like deflect the
Sure.
argument. You're definitely from that kind of generation of people who's moving away from that. And I guess to say sort of in closing, like I'm glad that we have come across each other again. We came across each other in undergrad, two ships passing in the night, maybe with some stuff in common that we wouldn't have realized. And now we've kind of in this strange way that life works, we found ourselves on this corner of Twitter, not and probably coming from very different, initial political starting points, but nevertheless, kind of converging on this kind of dissident, disillusioned space that follows, Trump and Bernie, and now we're in the, Biden era. it's kind of funny how people come back together, and how there's a lot that they have in common, both personally and politically, even if there's also things they don't have in common. And I'm grateful for it. I'm glad we could do this podcast, and we could happy to do a follow-up. Can kick some thoughts around for that, and let's definitely stay in touch. I'm curious about your thesis and all that too. So, all right, thanks a lot for coming on.
Yeah, likewise. I mean, just thanks for having me on. I enjoyed it. Glad to have it's an internet relationship, but I think that it is a real relationship, quote unquote. I'm glad to be getting to know you. And I liked a lot of what you said, and again, like I don't know how you want to run your podcast, but you can always come on again anytime if you want.
We'll do it again. I'll kick some more thoughts around. We can reminisce more, or we can get more into like the meat of some of your thoughts on things and be even more polemical. So have a great rest of your day.